This might be one of the hardest commandments for us to keep, frankly. Our very way of life and all the cycles of our culture make it difficult. All the more so if you didn't grow up with it. Even if you did, there's much to conspire against it. How much did it take just to get here this morning? At 8 o'clock, there was a couple who had made it here from Everett. On time, even. To choose worshiping God over all those other possibilities and tempting opportunities is really something. And I know I'm preaching to those of you who know. Now, given my dad was a priest and my mother a lifelong Episcopalian, Sabbath was pretty hard to miss in our house. It meant that all 4 of us children donned dresses, clean, dress shoes, polished, and a pair of white gloves, hopefully matching, though I rarely found matching ones. The whole day, though, felt sacred. We'd get to church, my dad would be doing what priests did on Sundays, and I don't think I thought of it as working on the Sabbath. I do recall feeling immersed in the liturgy, moving my lips silently and praying even the priest's words, memorized long before I could remember not knowing them. Afterwards, we'd head home for lunch. My dad would go upstairs for a nap, and my mother would take us all to the museum and share her love of another beauty. Those Sunday trips made that another sacred space for me, and one I love still. It was also one of the few free ways to keep 4 children occupied long enough for a tired priest to take a nap. And many days I couldn't have told you which experience felt more holy to me. It was time set aside. The whole of it formed us and created a Sabbath shape within the week and within ourselves. As children, it wasn't so much a day of rest as it was simply a day of being. Sundays had more space somehow. Later, I learned what a special blessing that was, and also how very difficult it is to pull off as an adult and a parent. Parents juggle children's sports, events, homework, I want to sleep in, groceries to order, food prep, pre-work emails to get a jump on, and more. Even as a member of this faith community, you might be on for coffee hour, altar guild, choir, greeter, worship leader, vestry person, godly play, live stream host, preaching. Those too are a sanctification of our time to God. In doing those, you help create this rhythm we need so desperately. Even God rested on the 7th day. We all have exceptions to this, certainly. Necessary challenges, as we heard in the reading this morning. And nevertheless, we need such a day. We need it holy. This was true for Jesus and those around him, including the challenges part, such that a handful of Pharisees couldn't have watched them so clearly if they weren't thinking there was something to be criticized. Jesus' response is not to snap back. It's to engage them in Sabbath's meaning, purpose, offering his teaching. The Sabbath was made for people, not people for the Sabbath. And to clarify the teaching, he questions their definition of Sabbath in light of the man with the withered hand when they're in the synagogue. Their silence is answer enough. Jesus looked around at them with anger. He was grieved at their hardness of heart. This is now a human cost, not merely a handful of grain kernels. And they make no allowance for mercy. Jesus shows it further by even denying them sight of his performing the healing. And he saves the one who's healed from accusations of complicity. Because when the man stretches out his hand, it is healed, already restored. Mark says this is when they conspired against him. And you know, the Sabbath is part of what shaped Jesus, and he lives it with mercy. It's part of what shapes us now, and we need live it with mercy. It's part of his identity and now part of ours. People looking for something to hold against him used that strict adherence as a test of his Jewish faithfulness. People were given this day of rest by God, a day to dwell in God's peace within ourselves and toward the world around us. It should be a day of rest. As Genesis says, God ordained. So God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because on it God rested from all the work that he had done in creation. Some translations say, make it holy instead of sanctified. Either way, the Hebrew word is kadosh, meaning set apart, consecrated, sanctified. This is the very first time the word is used in Scripture and the only place it appears in all of Genesis. Notice the very first holy thing in all creation isn't the earth or even the light. It's not humankind, Eden, or even the temple. It's Sabbath. The first holy thing is Sabbath. Now, when the disciples walked through a wheat field and plucked those kernels of wheat, were they really working? Or was it enjoying a gift from God? When Jesus healed the man's withered hand, did any of them say, wait a few hours until the sun goes down, or you'll get in trouble? Jesus challenged them to understand Sabbath beyond their stringency. The Sabbath is not an interlude, but rather the climax of living, the last day in God's creation and the first day of God's intention. If it was merely for the purpose of resting up for more work, then what would Sabbath mean for those who are retired, for children, for people whose work is taking care of other people in their own home? I think it gets harder to observe in these circumstances, and maybe that's what makes it all the more essential. Every week I see you living into this practice, living as if it matters, and it does, and living this as both a joy and a mutual inspiration. When else in one's week do we take a couple of hours free from work calls, chores, emails, from the puritanical guilt over not being endlessly productive? Is doing nothing along these lines really a waste of time? It's easy to think one needs satisfy a Sabbath in that way, or claim its purpose is to enhance the efficiency of our work. One philosopher said even Aristotle thought rest or relaxation was for the sake of returning to work, as if it's only for fortifying us to jump into Monday's work refreshed to do it all over again. Well, according to Scripture, that isn't Sabbath. Living into God's holy day, that holy rest itself, is the purpose. Being in it. Not getting from it to go on, being in it. Think back in your life to a moment of freedom or rest or a sense of recreation in your life. Imagine drawing that experience or feeling into the present day somehow. It's not only about stopping. Keeping the Sabbath is about recognizing and making that time holy. I'll depart here from my words because one day I left my phone at home and asked Mike to bring it, which he did. We were in church, and sure enough, some rude person in the choir's phone went off. It was mine. Mike had it in his pocket, and I was so embarrassed. It was pretty clear I knew what my ringtone was, and he pulled it out of his pocket, irritated as all heck. Who calls a priest on Sunday morning? Apparently, her daughter does. Wouldn't you think they'd know? He fumbles, turns it off, and we finish the service. And both of us thought, really? Don't they know what we do on Sunday mornings? And later I thought, how lovely that that's when they feel the whole. That's when they need the connection with where they learned Sabbath, where they found a sense of holiness in God's day. And that day still is that way, even though my children don't much go to church. That little reminder is in their hearts on Sunday, and I hear it when they call. I'm still working on them. I haven't given up. Brother Curtis of the Society of St. John the Evangelist writes that claiming and revering space for rest and recreation is absolutely essential for you to be whole and holy. Truth be told, he writes, I have to work to keep the Sabbath. Living in a monastery has not spared me of this struggle. He says, we practice a Sabbath rest to be fully alive, and you need it. God knows you need it, and you're worth it. Mary Oliver's first volume of poetry has one called The Summer Day. Really should have been called The Sabbath. The last two lines are very famous now, but what comes before them helps illustrate the gift of Sabbath, which as an Episcopalian, she observed with gusto. So as part of your Sabbath today, close your eyes, clear your mind a bit, and listen to this excerpt. Who made the world? Who made the swan? Who made the black bear? The grasshopper? This grasshopper, I mean, the one who has flung herself out of the grass, the one who is eating sugar out of my hand. I don't know exactly what a prayer is. I do know how to pay attention, how to fall down into the grass, how to kneel down in the grass, how to be idle and blessed, how to stroll through the fields, which is what I've been doing all day. Tell me, what else should I have done? Doesn't everything die at last and too soon? Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life?